When you can't use cookies, that's when access tokens become a great option for authentication. To get ourselves started, let's go ahead and make a directory. So make dir, as we're going to have two separate projects, our backend and then a separate front end. We'll call this folder access token authentication, and let's go ahead and cd into that folder. Once we're in here, we can go ahead and npm init AdonisJS at latest, our new AdonisJS project that we'll call our backend. We'll be using this project as an API, so we'll select the API starter kit, and we'll be using access tokens for our authentication here. Again, if you do have cookies available, session authentication is going to be much more straightforward, but we'll move forward with access token here today. I use Postgres for my database, but feel free to select whichever one's applicable to you. And let's have it go ahead and install our dependencies. While it's doing that, I'm going to create a brand new tab. And within our same access token authentication folder, let's create a brand new front end app. For this, I'll be using Vue. So we'll npm create Vue at latest, and I'll call this the front end. Go ahead and run that. I'm going to pass on TypeScript for now, as well as JSX. We'll go ahead and add Vue router and Pinia. I'll skip Vitest. We won't be doing any testing here today. Skip ESLint and the dev tools for right now. Feel free to select any of those applicable to your use case though. Go ahead and cd into our front end here and run npm install. We now have our front end set up, so I'm going to clear out of that and boot it up. So npm run dev, and let's jump back over to our AdonisJS tab. Looks like our project created successfully here. So let's go ahead and cd into our back end. And we're going to need to migrate before we start this up. So let's go ahead and get both of these projects open within our text editor. This blue tinted one here I'm going to use as our front end. So hit file, open folder, dive into code, jump into our access token authentication, and I'll select front end for this blue one. Cool. So here we have our Vue app. Now I'll jump over to our normal looking Visual Studio Code that we usually use, file, open folder. And for this one, we'll open up our backend, which will be our AdonisJS project. As you can see, we have missing environment variables to take care of. So we'll go ahead and jump into our .env file and take care of that. All we need to worry about for right now is our DB password and DB database. I have a test database that I'd like to reuse, but do apply your applicable database name there or create a new one if you need to. Then we'll enter in our Postgres user's password. Mine just happens to be password. Okay, with that set up, the API and access token starter kit that we used for AdonisJS has us set up with a create users table that will define our users with a full name, email, password, as well as an ID and created at, as well as an access tokens table that has an ID, a tokenable ID that will relate back to our users, type, name, hash, abilities, created at, updated at, last used, and expires. Abilities here are optional, and you can specify them whenever you're creating your token. We're going to be ignoring them here today as we're just covering the basics of Auth. But do note that they exist, and the documentation covers the difference between these abilities and bouncer abilities. We can jump back into our terminal, and within our backend, we can run node ace migration run. Now, since I am reusing a database that already has stuff applied within it, I'm going to go ahead and have AdonisJS remove everything that I have pre-existing inside of this database and then run my migrations by using migration fresh. And as you can see, that dropped any tables that I had within this database and just migrated forward. Again, if you're working with a brand new database, you just need to run migration run. Cool. So next, let's go ahead and create ourselves an auth controller. So node ace make controller, call this auth, keep it singular with -s, and we'll add a register, login, logout, and me methods within this controller. And then while we're here, let's go ahead and make a validator as well. So node ace make validator, and we'll just call this auth. All right, now we're ready to dive into our app. And let's go ahead and do our validator first. So we'll dive into here, and we're going to want one validator for registration and one for login. So we'll export const our register validator equals vine compile vine object. We will have an email property of type vine string email, and we can have it normalize that email as well, just using default normalizations. And we also want this to be unique. So we'll have async db with a callback function, do const match equals await db from users, select just the ID where email is, and let's grab the value as well. This is the value that the user is trying to register with. Pass that into there. And we just care about whether or not we have any results. So we'll just check for the first and return and inverse our match. So if we do have a match, we'll want to return false here as our unique validation has failed. And if we don't have a match, then we want to return true as our unique validation is approved. And then we're going to have a password field here as well. Now we're going to want the same password validation between both our register and our login validator. So we can define that in one spot just above both of these as const password or password role equals vine string. And let's just apply a min length of 8 for now. Cool. So we can scroll down a little bit here and let's export const login validator equals vine compile vine object. We'll have our email, vine string email, and we'll go ahead and normalize that there too. We don't want to check for uniqueness here because this is during our login. So the user already exists inside of the database. And then we just need to add in our password. Give that a save. That'll auto format. If you have limpfix on save applied. And now we're ready to dive into our controllers, auth controller. So we'll start with our registration, and we're going to need our request, and we'll grab our const data from await request.validate using our register validator, and then we'll need to create a user with that data. So const user equals await user, hit tab to auto import that, and pass in our validated data. Once we have that user, then we just need to create a new access token for them and return that token back as a response for this request. So we can just return user.accessTokens.create and pass in the user. If you're using abilities here, you can specify those as the second argument. By default, this will look something like this to allow all abilities. And then we have additional options as the third argument. By default, these access tokens will not expire. So if you do want them to expire, you can specify an expires in. If you want it to be long-lived but still have an expiration, you might set this to something like 5 years, which I believe is the default duration for the Remember Me tokens for session authentication. Or you could set it to something like 30 days as well, whatever your heart desires there. For us, we're just going to roll with the defaults. So we'll take both of those off and leave it at just create. Now, if you're wondering where this access tokens comes from, if we take a look at our user model, we do have this with AuthFinder, the exact same that we have within session authentication, that we can use to check whether or not the user has provided a correct email and password. That'll come into play whenever we cover login. But if we scroll down a little bit further here, we're going to see a static access tokens property that comes from DB access tokens provider for the model, and it provides in our user. This access tokens provider is what provides the actual access token property onto our user, and that's a static property as well. So if we take a look at what we have available on that, so user.access tokens here, we can get all of the user's tokens. We can create a token, delete a token, find a specific token, and verify the validity of a token as well. So via that API, working with tokens within AdonisJS is rather straightforward. Cool. Let's scroll down a little bit and take care of our login next. This is actually going to look relatively similar. So we'll just have a request, and then we just need to grab our email and password from our await request validate using our login validator. Now, rather than creating a user, we just need to verify whether or not the email and password is correct. So we'll do const user equals, and that's where that AuthFinder mixin comes into play that we just saw in our user model. We can await user dot, and that with AuthFinder mixin provides a verify credentials method on our user as a static method. We pass in the UID, which is our email, the user's unique identifier, and then their password. That AuthFinder mixin is also going to hash the user's password during the creation step. It adds a before save hook on there to check for the password change. And if it finds a mutated password, it will automatically hash it and secure it inside of our database. So that's taken care of automatically as well. And now that we have our user, just like we did with our register, we just need to create an access token to log this user in with. So we'll return user.access tokens, create. You have the same options available here. We're just going to stick with passing our user in for now. And there we go. There's our login. We'll scroll down a little bit and let's take care of our logout. So we have our auth, await user access tokens. And here we'll want to use the delete to delete an access token, essentially logging them out. Pass in the authenticated user, which we can get via const user equals auth user, and we'll do an exclamation point there to assert that a user is actually authenticated. And we'll ensure that by adding a middleware whenever we define this route, and then we'll provide our user in there. And then we can get the user's current access token via user.current access token, and then we just need to provide that access token's identifier as such. And that will delete out that user's access token via its identifier, in turn essentially logging the user out, as that access token will no longer exist inside of our database and can no longer be used to match against an authenticated user. Then we just need to return something here. We'll just do message success. And then lastly, we have our me. We're going to want this method to work whether or not a user is authenticated or not. So we'll just do a silent auth check. This will check the default guard or an authenticated user. And if it's found, then it will populate that auth user. Within our logout, we're going to use a middleware to make that happen automatically. But within our me, we'll manually make that check because we will not have a middleware for this one. And then we'll return user and use that newly populated auth.user. If the user is logged in, this will be populated with that user's details. And if they're not, our user will not be populated. Cool. So let's go define these routes. Scroll down, we'll have a router.post/register using our auth controller, register method as auth register. We'll have a router.post/login, again using our auth controller, the login method as auth login, and then we'll have a router.delete, or you can do a post here as well, /logout, auth controller, logout as auth logout. Now the reason I'm using delete here is because we are actually deleting a token out of our database whenever we do log out. So in turn, it is a literal deletion, but that is completely up to you. And then we'll do router.get/me, use our auth controller, the me method as auth.me. Now, in terms of our middleware, all that we want to do is apply a middleware to log out, use middleware dot, and verify that a user is authenticated in order for them to successfully be able to log out. And this middleware is also what populates that auth user for us. Remember, we're manually checking for an auth user in our me, using auth.check. This middleware will do something similar, but it will also throw an error if a user is not actually authenticated. Cool. So we should now have our backend, our AdonisJS side all set up. So let's dive back into our terminal and boot this up. So npm run dev. We can also hide this text editor back away and jump into our front end text editor now. The first thing that we're going to want to do is create a new page for registration. So we'll create a new file within here. You can put these inside of a new folder called auth. We're just going to keep everything flat for this lesson. So we'll do register and we'll stick with the Vue naming convention that they have going on so far. We'll have a template with a form at submit prevent, and we'll call this method submit whenever we get to it. We'll have a label, span, our email field, and then we'll have an input type email, model form email. And let's give this a copy and a paste. Switch this from email to password. Type will be password there as well. And our model will now be form.password. Lastly, to end out our form, we're going to have a button, type submit with text of register. Cool. Now we need to create those. So we'll do script setup. Let's go ahead and import ref from Vue, and we'll import use router from Vue router. Let's go ahead and grab our router equals use router, and let's const form equals ref and stub our form with an email and password property. Then we need our async function called submit to do register user. And then once that user is registered, we'll go ahead and push the user to the home page. Give that a save. Let's give all of this here a copy and create a new view for our login. So login view.view, go ahead and paste those contents in, switch our register text to login, scroll on up, and our to-do is the only thing here that changes. Instead of registering user, we just want to log in that user. And then let's go define the routes for them. So we'll jump into our router, index, scroll down a little bit. We'll leave everything as is that currently exists. Define a new path for /register, apply the name of register, and specify our component there too. And then we'll do this exact same thing for login, just like so. Now there's many different approaches that you could take whenever it comes to actually authenticating your user on the front end. For us here today, I think creating a singular store that houses all of our authentication logic probably going to be the most straightforward, easy to reference for us. So let's go ahead and create a new store, new file, and we'll call this auth.js. Go ahead and create that. We'll import ref as well as unref from Vue, and we'll import define store from Pinia. Export const use auth store equals define store auth, and go ahead and create that. Inside of here, we'll have a const user is ref, and we'll default this to null. And then we'll have a const token, which will be our access token, equals ref, and we'll attempt to grab the default value for this from our local storage. Get item, and we'll call that token. Depending on what environment it is that you're working with, you'll need to determine how you want to store your token. Since we're rolling with the assumption that we don't have cookies available, which if we did, we would just use session authentication, then local storage is an alternative option for us here on the front end to store our token here long term. And it also makes our token available across tabs if the user tries to open up a new tab with our application open. Cool. Let's go ahead and create a helper function now. So async function, we'll call this API. We'll just kind of wrap fetch here a little bit. So we'll have a method, URL, and a payload defaulted to an empty object. Const response equals await fetch http / and point this to our AdonisJS server at 3333. And then whatever URL we specify. Then for the config for our request, we'll want to pass in our method, specify our headers, that the content type will be application JSON, and then we'll do authorization, provide in bearer, and then you could unref the token there as Codium is suggesting, or we could just reach for token.value to get the actual value of the token there too. And it's this authorization header with the bearer and then the actual token value that's in charge of authenticating our user for each request. Whenever we send a request out to our AdonisJS server, AdonisJS will then check for this bearer token, check it against our access tokens for the user, find the user that way, and that is essentially how this access token authentication works. So if we don't provide this authorization header with our bearer token, you're never going to be authenticated. But if you do provide it, then it will attempt to find the token for a user and then use that user to authenticate the request. Then we'll have our body. Since we can't specify bodies on GET requests, we'll want to do a ternary check here. So method does not equal GET. Then we can go ahead and JSON stringify our payload. Otherwise, we'll just set that to null. And then lastly, we'll return response JSON. You'll want to take some extra consideration here for error handling. We're not going to worry about that in particular here today because there's a wide array of different front ends that you may be using. And our goal here today is just to cover the basics of authentication. Cool. So next, let's go ahead and create a function to actually authenticate a user. We'll take in the result of our API request. And then we want to set the token.value that we have as our ref at the top of the store equal to the result.token. This result is what the result will actually be during our register and login responses. And then we'll go ahead and set this to our local storage, set item token as token.value there as well. Next up, we can go ahead and take care of our login and register method. So async function login will accept then the payload from the form, const result equals await. We'll use our API helper, do a post request to/login and provide in our payload. And then we just want to authenticate the user with that result. Next up, we'll do our register. It's going to look relatively similar. We'll have a const result from a post request out to/register with that payload. And then we just want to authenticate the user there as well. Logout and me are going to be a little bit different. So async function logout, we don't need to accept anything in for this, but we do need to delete our tokens. So we'll do await API, send out a delete request or post request if that's how you defined it to/logout. And then once that's succeeded, we'll set our actual token store value to null, our user value to null, and then we'll go ahead and delete that local storage item. So remove item. Lastly, we have our me. So we'll do async function me. We'll do a const result equals await API, a get request to/me. Once we get that result, we'll want to set that as our user's value. And then we can also return back that value there as well. Lastly, to make all of these accessible, we can return user, login, register, logout, and me. We'll keep our helpers and our actual token just as internal properties and methods for our store here. Cool. So now we're ready to start rigging these up. So let's jump into our register view. We have our to-do right here. What we're going to want to do is grab our auth store. So we can do this right above our router. So const auth equals use auth store. And then in place of our to-do here, we can now do await auth, call our register method, and provide our form in. So we forgot to make use of unref. Let's go jump into our auth store again and do that. So we'll scroll up to our API helper, and we're going to be passing the ref of our payload in. You could also do form.value, but I like how just passing the form in looks. So we can wrap our payload here in unwrap to remove the reference and just get access to the underlying payload data. Okay, let's jump back into our register view. So that should be good now. The alternative that I was talking about, if you don't want to use unref, is just to do form.value there. Okay, now we just need to do the exact same thing in our login. So import our auth store. So const auth equals use auth store. And then for our to-do, await auth, login, and provide in our form. Since we have everything pushing back to our home after we log in or register, we'll make our home kind of the designator of whether or not we're logged in. So we'll import use router from view router, const auth equals use auth store. So now we can do auth.user just like we are within our AdonisJS server to get access to our auth user. Const router equals use router. We can go ahead and try to populate the authenticated user by doing auth.me. I'm going to leave that without an await just so that we don't have to worry about suspense. And we'll just add an if to check whether or not it's populated inside of the template. And then we'll also want to add in a logout function. So we'll do async function, logout, await, auth, and then call our logout method. And then we can do router.push and push the user to the login page. Cool. For our template, we'll replace this welcome component with a div vif auth.user, div velse, no user found. Inside of our auth user vif, we can go ahead and do, say, a span that says something like welcome auth user email. And then underneath that span, we're going to want a form at submit prevent that calls our logout method that allows this authenticated user to log out. And then we can just do a button of type submit with logout in there. Cool. So if we give that a save, we should already have the server running. Go ahead and jump into your browser. Let's go to localhost. Oh, forgot to note what port this is running on here. So we'll jump back over to our view, 5173. So colon 5173. There we go. And okay, it looks like we do have something for our auth user, but we shouldn't because we haven't logged in yet. So let's jump back into our front end text editor. And I bet this is going wrong within our auth store. If we scroll down to our me method, we're just plopping result directly into our user where this should be result.user. There we go. So with that saved, actually, while we're also in here, let's jump into our app.view where we have our router links, and let's add an additional router link to our login and our register page there as well. Jump back into our browser, give this a refresh, and there we go. So now we see no user found. We don't have a user registered yet, so we'll need to register a user first before we can try logging in. We'll do test@test.com and give them some password there, hit register, and there we go. So now we're redirected back to our homepage where we get our test@test.com welcome message. If we refresh, that user is still authenticated. And if we give this a copy, since we're storing this inside of local storage, and open this up inside of a different browser tab, we are still authenticated in both of these tabs now. Awesome. We can go ahead and log out, which directs us back to our login page, where we can do test@test.com, password, and login, and that works too. Furthermore, if we dive into our inspect, take a look at our console for the network requests. I have XHR enabled down there for that. Give this page a refresh. We can see our me goes out. If we take a look at that, specifically the headers, scroll down a little bit, we'll see our request headers where we have our authorization and our bearer and our token value being sent up. Again, that's what AdonisJS is using to match against a user and consider them authenticated. which in turn allows AdonisJS to find that user and return its details back in our response. It's serializing the password as null, so that's being omitted altogether from the response as well for security purposes. And there you go. There's the gist of access token authentication with AdonisJS. And in this case, we used Vue for our front end.